but I will. I'll go ahead and start with the Michigan-Alabama game. With no disrespect to Texas or Washington, this was the game that I think I think everybody was looking forward to Alabama, Michigan. Two huge brands, helmet game, Harbaugh versus Saban, SEC versus Big Ten. That is the future of this sport. I was lucky enough, by the way, to be at the first half of this game. Went to Fox Sports Radio, did the post-game show after, so I couldn't stay until the end. But a crazy game. I don't know if you'd call it a classic with all of the miscues, but we certainly got a classic ending. And when I look at this game, first thing that stands out, I don't think you can say that either team played anything close to their best football. And I think no matter how it happened, there was one team that felt like they gave the game away, could have won. In this case, it was obviously Alabama. Michigan, of course, I think everybody knows by now, but they win in overtime. What was the final score? 27-20, I think was the final score. In terms of the game, and that was the final score, by the way. In terms of the game, I mean, listen, the kind of the story of the game, again, great ending, but wasn't it like weirdly very sloppy, especially early? You have a situation where on the opening play of the game, J.J. McCarthy throws an interception. You have two muffed punts by Michigan. You have a missed PAT by Michigan, a missed field goal by Michigan. Alabama, Jalen Milroe, a fumble because he's carrying the ball in the wrong hand on the outside when he should have been. You get the point. Snapping issues from Alabama. Weird game, crazy game, but ultimately, what I thought this game came down to was, ironically, in my opinion, the story of each team's season played out late. Michigan finding a way, but also Alabama, from their perspective, the final play, the final moment of their season coming down to Jalen Milroe with the ball in his hands. And so let's dive in. Let's just listen. We could beat around the bush. I always say it. We could do at the 11-minute mark of the second quarter, they ran a toss sweep. And what does that mean? Back to you in the boat. Like, that's not what we do on this show. Let's not waste any more time. To me, the game came down to the final few minutes. Weird game, by the way. Michigan, I thought, largely dominated the first half to the surprise of a lot of people. Not me. I picked Michigan to win, but that's neither here nor there. Michigan largely dominated the game. Then dominated the first half, I should say. Then from about the beginning of the third till about 4 minutes to go, Alabama is in complete control. I don't know what Nick Saban and Tommy Rees did at halftime, but they took control of that game. But really, again, the story was the final few minutes. From the Michigan side of things, this is who they are. This is what they've been about all year. Resilience, perseverance, finding a way late in games. Penn State, you go back to that game, struggled early. What do? They run the ball 32, 33, 34, whatever it was, straight times to finish that game and seal that victory. Ohio State, that long drive late in the game, seal the victory. J.J. McCarthy throwing across his body, you get the first down. And then this game, what ends up happening? You miss the field goal about 6-7 minutes to go. You think it's over. You get a defensive stop. You convert a fourth down. You convert a play to Roman Wilson in which the ball is tipped and he kind of catches it with one hand. And you're like, how the heck did he do that? But they find a way. They get into the end zone. They force overtime, and they find a way. From the Alabama perspective, let's just dive in. Because to me, I thought that the ending of this game was very emblematic of their season as well. If you've watched Alabama, listen, we've talked about it on this show time and time and time again. Part of the reason that I liked Michigan to win this game, and I'm not saying it to brag and Torres tried to tell you and Aaron Wright and blah, blah, blah. No, part of the reason I liked Alabama to win this game was because we knew their limitations. We knew their strengths and weaknesses. We knew that they don't have an elite wide receiver on this team. We knew that, oh, by the way, Jace McClellan, unless you're an Alabama fan or a college football junkie that watches every minute of every game, you don't know who Jace McClellan is. You don't know who Justice Haynes is. The stars of this Alabama team were Jalen Milroe and the defense. And so it's funny because, I saw a lot of pushback on the final play call. Thought it was interesting. After the game, Nick Saban basically said, look, we didn't have a final play. We had 3 final plays. We thought we were lined up in something really good. Michigan calls a timeout. Then we were lined up in something that I wasn't so sure about, so I called a timeout. Then we lined up in something. We had to run the play. There were no more timeouts, and they made a great play. And so it's interesting because I see a lot of people, how is that the final play call? And I get it. I'm not even saying that I necessarily disagree with you. Now, I'm not smart enough to, I'm not smart enough to tell Nick Saban that he was wrong or Tommy Rees that he was wrong. And I'm not enough of an X's and O's expert to know if they were. But why I didn't have a problem with the play call, even though you run it up the middle, could you have maybe gone to the edge? Could you have maybe done the Vince Young in the Rose Bowl, try to find the corner of the end zone? I don't know. But what I do know is their whole season was defined by Jalen Milroe making plays, making big throws with his arm, making huge throws with his legs. And so because of that, I just go back to the most simple concept of college football, right? The idea that in the biggest moments, you want the ball in the hands of your best playmakers. Think about the iconic defensive stops in football history. Seattle on the goal line against New England. What do we complain about? You should have just given the ball to Marshawn Lynch. Ironically for Pete Carroll, that Vince Young national championship game that I just told you about. If you remember, there was a moment when USC had a fourth down opportunity late in the game. Reggie Bush is on the sidelines. They don't give the ball to Reggie Bush. They don't give the ball to number 5. And so I just bring it up because I can't get mad at Alabama because it didn't work, because ultimately you put the ball in your best player's hands, the guy who defined your season. And on this particular play, he couldn't make a play. Quickly, in the bigger picture of the game, outside of how it went down and all that stuff, two things stand out about these two teams. From the Alabama side, I'll just be blunt. This does not change my opinion of what I have said about Alabama all season long. I believe this is Nick Saban's best coaching job of his time at Alabama. And I believe he squeezed every ounce that he could have out of this team. Listen, I know if you're an Alabama fan, you're frustrated, you're disappointed. Every single year that doesn't end in a national championship is a disappointment. I think this one's especially frustrating because the story goes, for people who don't know it, every player that has played for Nick Saban over the course of 3 years, if you make it to your junior year, you have won a national championship. That's maybe the craziest Nick Saban stat ever. But coming into this game, 2020 was the last time that Alabama won a national championship. Poor Alabama, you feel terrible for. But that was the story. Every single junior class had won at least one national championship. And so I know it's disappointing that you can't get these juniors that ring, that national title. But I think you also have to look at this from the holistic view of the entire season. Remember, this was a year. You're coming off maybe the most disappointing season of the Nick Saban era a year ago, when you can't get to the playoff with the number 1 and number 3 picks in the draft, Bryce Young and Will Anderson. Don't beat LSU. Don't beat Tennessee. Don't go to the playoff. Don't compete for a national championship. And so you have that disappointing year. You replace both coordinators. You don't know who is going to replace Bryce Young at quarterback, to the point that essentially, again, that quarterback competition went into the season. They did not have the answer. Think about it. Michael Penix transfers to Washington 2 years ago. Day one, he's been the starter for the last 2 years. Quinn Ewers has started, when he's not hurt, basically every single game. J.J. McCarthy has started essentially every game in the last 2 years after taking the job from Cade McNamara. Alabama literally did not know who their starting quarterback was in week 3 of this season. That tells you everything you need to know. And so I know I've said it before, but you go back to that Texas game, you go back to that South Florida game, when they played 3 different quarterbacks, you said, this might be Saban's worst team ever. This might be a 7-5 type team. And they just keep getting better, keep finding ways. Beat it, what ended up being a 10-win Ole Miss team. Beat a Texas A&M team in which you essentially this A&M team, you basically got Jimbo Fisher fired. I mean, let's just say it. You beat a really good, they were okay. You beat the Heisman Trophy winner, let me put it that way, in LSU. And most importantly, you beat Georgia in the SEC title game. Again, 2-time reigning national champion. The team that everybody is trying to say your dynasty is over, their dynasty has begun. You are a second-class citizen in your league. No. You win the SEC, You make it to the college football playoff. And that's maybe the biggest picture of all to me. In a year that I don't think anybody thought you had, just what I just said. Didn't know who your quarterback was until about week 4. You don't have, in my opinion, elite wide receivers. You don't have, in my opinion, an elite O-line, although they played well in the third and fourth quarters on Monday night. You were still a play away from potentially going to play for a national championship. So that tells me that Saban did everything he could. From the Michigan perspective, listen, I know I keep banging home this point. We just, at some point, we got to give this team credit, right? Think about this team is really two things. One, I don't think they've gotten enough credit all year. And two, they are just the most resilient team I've ever seen. From the not enough credit all year, right? What every single thing about them has been negative. Every single thing about them has been questioned. Played an easy out-of-conference schedule. Well, how good are they? Beat a bunch of bad Big Ten teams. Well, how good are they? Jim Harbaugh finally comes back. They finally get some momentum. Then the Connor Stallion stuff happens. And we don't need to relitigate the whole Connor Stallion stuff, but it becomes an indictment on the entire program. They're overrated. They're only winning because they're cheating. I saw this video on the internet, and Connor Stallions whispered into the defensive coordinator's ear, they must have known the play. Yeah, maybe they were just running a pass play because it was 3rd and 7. Not everything is the craziest scandal that's ever been existing, But you get to the Penn State game. They're doubted. They show up. They don't know who their head coach is. Everyone's saying maybe Ohio State, this is the year. They get to the playoff. They're the number 1 seed. Alabama, everybody thinks Alabama's going to win. And they find a way. And so I look at this team and I am just amazed by them. Because I thought even in the playoff, you finally get to the playoff and you're still not getting credit. Maybe it's because I was at media stuff all week with Alabama and Michigan. But you listen to the narratives that are coming out. It's like, well, I mean, how good are they really? Those Big Ten offenses are terrible. I think that their defense is overrated. It's like, okay, maybe the defense is overrated. But maybe they also played statistically the 3 best defenses in college football this year outside of themselves. Ohio State, we could criticize whatever. Their defense is amazing. NFL dudes everywhere. Penn State, NFL dudes everywhere. Don't look at what happened against Ole Miss. They had 3, 4, 5 players opt out. Iowa, elite defense all year. And so I felt like this team was continued to be doubted, and they persevered. And in the bigger picture, listen, we'll give a national championship pick sometime this week, but this is also why I have always been a believer in this team. I've said it a million times. I can't ever remember a team overcoming more adversity and just letting everything roll off their shoulders quite like this Michigan team. You go back to 2 off seasons ago. I've said it a million times. Forgive me. Jim Harbaugh interviewed for a head coaching job on National Signing Day. Imagine being a parent of a player that's about to sign letter of intent, supposed to be the happiest day of their lives. And your coach is interviewing for the Minnesota Vikings job. And so you look at that moment in time. You look at the fact that, that team overcame the whispers and the rumors and the innuendo. You look at the fact that last offseason, Jim Harbaugh flirted with everybody. It's like the Home Alone 2. Yeah, I saw you here last night. You were smooching with everybody. Bodie Bob, Cliff, I could go on forever, baby. That was Jim Harbaugh. Last offseason, Panthers he talked with, Broncos he talked with, and it just rolls off this team's shoulders. And so to me, this year, the Connor Stallion stuff, we'll wrap with that. Everyone's questioning him. Everyone's this, everyone's that. You go to Penn State, you don't know who your head coach is. Your head coach gets suspended. He ends up not coaching Penn State, not coaching Ohio State. You find a way, and you do it again on Monday and get the win against Alabama. Lastly, let me just say this. I've mentioned Connor Stallions in passing a few times. I think this game, in my opinion, should probably end any Connor Stallions conversation. I think it really should have ended against Penn State and Ohio State. It's like, if at this point, if you can't appreciate this team, and I know there's certain media members, certain this, certain that, play up they cheated, they this, they that, they blah, blah, blah. It's like, no. There was no Connor Stallions since the middle of the season. No Jim Harbaugh for the Penn State game, 1. No Jim Harbaugh for the Ohio State game, 1. No Connor Stallions for the Alabama game. 1. At some point, we just have to acknowledge this is a great team and a great program. And now they're headed to Houston to play for a national championship.